Hello, my name is Jad Ghandour, and in this video presentation I'll be discussing my research and plans for a folly on the site of the Beirut port. The following is a quote from Martin Heidegger's Building, Dwelling, Thinking. Mortals would never be capable of it, if dwelling were merely a staying on earth under the sky before the divinities among mortals. Rather, dwelling itself is always a staying with things. Dwelling, as preserving, keeps the fourfold in that with which mortals stay, in things. Heidegger's Building, Dwelling, Thinking is a daunting read for many who lack the prior understanding of what caused this writing to come to fruition. It is a philosopher's plea to architects to acknowledge nature, to reflect and include it in their works, for humans dwell within the fourfold, the amalgamation of earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. We build as a result of such dwelling. But what does it mean to build with the prospects of dwelling in mind? Building is tied to protection, nurturing, and sparing, something Heidegger closely correlates with freedom, as by admitting nature's presence into building, one is allowing the fourfold to permeate space, thus allowing for dwelling to occur. However, man does not solely dwell in a building, he dwells in the spaces around it, as the building is a locale, a place of gathering, now an inherent part of earth, and by proxy, the fourfold. Dwelling is not the primary target that building aims to achieve, as it may not even happen within many buildings. The main intent is always to protect man from the harsher aspects of the fourfold, the natural phenomena, as well as to provide space within which man can perform desired activities inherent to man's evolution. Thus, building serves primarily humanity's need for shelter and protection to sustain on earth. Thenceforth, the notion of sparing in relation to building allows for dwelling to occur. This form of safeguarding, observed when the act of building does not disrupt the nature of the fourfold, opens the gate for the fourfold to nurture man, who is now bound to dwell within and around areas created by man-made inert structures. Therefore, building as a locale is part of an extensio, or a surrounding of scapes. When the latter allows trees and plants to sprout and grow, thus keeping man in an intimate connection with pristine nature and the wilderness, the result of man's and nature's mutual nurturing of each other allows for peace to exist, thus providing havens in which man can be free to evolve. Therefore, by acquiescing the fourfold as integral to the act of building, man can dwell peacefully in consciousness, given that, for Heidegger, the essence of dwelling resides in existing among the earth, under the sky, striving for prosperity that only man's divine creative aptitudes and history allow. For my Rig 4 model, I focused on the concept of spatial modulation and the subordination of a building to nature, making the paper hinge the core that gives the elements a binding dynamism while simultaneously forming an anchor to the earth within itself. Additionally, my conceptual expansion of the Rig 4 model converts what was once a plenum adorning the structure into a new dwelling space. The following images were my earlier exploration of the state of permeability, where I experimented with projection of light and shadows. For my Rigan model, I decided to explore the verticality of the silos by creating a folly within long walls that manipulate individuals' viewpoints as well as manipulating landscapes. A large elevator at the base of the silos transports people upwards into the folly, which consists of multiple branching pathways and promenades that overlook the coast of Beirut, as well as into the folly so that they could observe other individuals experiencing it. They can then proceed to the left, which contains an observatory, which constructs to zoom in, giving the beholders the opportunity to peer into the ocean. They can also cross over to the right and find themselves a small slit to peer through to look at the city line of Beirut. After peering through the slit, one can find the opportunity to continue their ascent to newer elevations to reach the final attraction, which I call Bravery Bridge. So, in its original state, the bridge is compacted and none able to reach the opposite wall. This is because there is a mechanism within the bridge that is positioned to challenge the individual's bravery, as they must step in and walk through into the void to find that the bridge will then extend as they walk, taking them to the other side. Once on the other side, they can find a metal sheet, which when touched will have soft and subtle vibrations, which will remind them and hint at the history of Beirut, given the wars and the traumas and the tragedies that it has experienced over the many, many years. After touching this wall, an elevator, which was hidden inside the wall, will open and allow them to descend back into the rest of the folly. This quarantines the area, allowing it to only be accessible by those who will take the challenge. And the positioning of the multiple pathways below prevent other people from predicting what they must do when at Bravery Bridge. Bravery Bridge's functionality can be visualized by analyzing the following video of an extending pathway, but instead of activating this bridge with a button, a mechanism resembling a curved treadmill, which purely functions based off of one's movement, activates the mechanism. The following images are my earlier explorations of permeability and freefall within the rig end models. I began by developing a contraction that extends beyond a simple support and adding a rotating mechanism which incorporates the model into its surroundings. I then proceeded to experiment with using opposing planes in an attempt to give a sense of spatial presence and diversity. The amalgamation of the previously mentioned and evolved concepts allowed me to create a new experience within the walls of my folly while integrating this experience into the fourfold, enabling dwelling. This is what the rig end model would look like when placed in a physical space, as the constant movement between the elevator, observatory, and Bravery Bridge would constantly vitalize the space. When examining this photo of the silos, it aesthetically connects to an earlier era of Beirut, which was a hub for nautical activity in the region. These remnants are now devoid of purpose, as the silos are no longer capable of storing grains. This creates the perfect site that has evolved back into a space that can be rewritten and redefined. The aim of this project is to develop a folly along the site of the Beirut port. This new fate, in light of the August 4 tragedy, cements the silos as a doorway between the past and the future, while it remains and tethers its beholders to the present. Therefore, when incorporating the rig end into the quay, I decided to observe its surroundings, taking note of the axis along the Santanal between two happenings, the port and the restless ocean. This axis was then projected downwards onto the quay, which coincided to cross at a collection of ruin and rubble and the contrasting crater, showing a beautiful dichotomy between the excess of mass and the lack of it. This dichotomy of lack of mass and excess of mass can also be reciprocated with lack of history and overabundance. Unfortunately, Beirut is known as the city that reinvents itself, and many of its historical artifacts have been forgotten or destroyed. Looking at the history of Beirut, I drew inspiration from what was once my great-grandfather's home, as well as the now defunct harbor, which is obscured by the artificial extension of the Manara. Other scapes that were forever altered are Solidaire's Green Line, an uncrossable street for many years due to the Civil War, which caused vegetation taking over. In addition, I looked at the American Embassy, which was destroyed in a terrorist attack. The general structure of the embassy, as well as the inclination of the rubble after the destruction of it, heavily influenced the pathways of my folly. This material rendering studies the elements of such historical sites that have heavily influenced my folly and the space around it. When designing my quay, I wanted to use the silo as the gate between the past and the future, which is why on one side the quay is strongly inspired by Beirut's nautical history, while also paying homage to the events that give the city its identity. In addition to the homages paid to the past of Beirut, as well as the mysticism of the future of Beirut, there is a long corridor created by elevations in land surrounding it, giving individuals a place to seek solitude, and this corridor will have the engravings of all the 210 people who have passed away since the explosion and as a result of the explosion, giving them a tribute as well. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering any questions and receiving your feedback.